In the heart of a bustling city, there's a tall office building where life moves at a fast pace. People rush in and out, phones buzz constantly, and coffee cups are always in hand. On the top floor sits a man who thinks he owns the world, or at least this part of it. He's a big-shot director with more money than he knows what to do with. Let's call him the director. His films make millions, but his ego? That makes billions. The director isn't just rich, he's also known for being brutally blunt. Some people admire his confidence, while others find him unbearable. If you're not careful around him, you might walk away feeling like you've been hit by a truck full of insults. But hey, that's just how he rolls. Or so everyone says. One day, after wrapping up an intense meeting about his next blockbuster movie, the director decides he needs a break. He steps out of the conference room, stretches his arms and heads toward the kitchen area to grab himself a cup of coffee. As he walks down the hallway, something catches his attention. From one of the corners comes the faint sound of someone speaking French. Not perfect French, mind you, but clearly someone practicing. Curious, the director peeks into the room and sees a woman busy mopping the floor. She's wearing a uniform, dark pants, a bright yellow shirt, and gloves. Her name tag reads Aisha, though no one really pays much attention to her beyond nodding politely when they pass her in the halls. Aisha is one of those invisible people who keep the building running smoothly without ever getting noticed. What grabs the director's attention isn't her mop or her uniform. It's the small earphones tucked into her ears. Through them, she listens intently to a language lesson on her phone. Every now and then she pauses her cleaning, repeats a phrase softly under her breath, and smiles as if she's cracked some secret code. For most people, this would be endearing, a glimpse into someone else's hard work and dedication. But the director? Well, let's just say humility isn't exactly his strong suit. Instead of admiring her effort, he feels a strange mix of amusement and irritation. Maybe it's because he speaks 5 languages himself, or maybe it's because he can't fathom why someone like her would even bother trying. "Excuse me," he says loudly, startling her mid-sentence. Aisha looks up, surprised. When she realizes who's standing there, her expression shifts slightly. It's not fear, but more like caution. Everyone knows the director has a reputation for cutting people down with words sharper than any blade. "Yes, sir," she replies, politely pulling out her earphones. He smirks, crossing his arms over his chest. "So I hear you're learning French?" She nods, keeping her tone respectful. "Yes, sir. Just trying to pick up a few things." His smirk grows wider. "Oh, really? Well, let's see how good you are." Without waiting for her response, he fires off a complicated sentence in French. Something convoluted, filled with fancy vocabulary and tricky grammar. To him, it's less of a test and more of a power move. After all, what are the chances she'll actually understand it? But instead of looking confused or embarrassed, Aisha tilts her head thoughtfully. For a moment, she stays silent, processing his words. Then, with calm precision, she translates the sentence back into English. Perfectly. No hesitation, no mistakes. The director freezes. His jaw drops ever so slightly, though he quickly tries to mask his shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. Someone like her, a cleaning lady, shouldn't be able to outsmart him, shouldn't even come close. "Well," he mutters awkwardly, clearly struggling to regain control of the situation. "Good job, I guess." Aisha gives him a polite smile. "Thank you, sir." And just like that, she goes back to her work, leaving him standing there like a deer caught in headlights. As the director walks away, his mind races. How could she know French better than half the actors he works with? Why does it bother him so much? He tells himself it doesn't matter, that she's still just a cleaner. But deep down, he can't shake off the encounter. It gnaws at him, reminding him of something he doesn't want to admit, that intelligence and talent aren't confined to boardrooms or red carpets. Sometimes they hide in plain sight, right under your nose. Little does he know, this brief exchange will set off a chain of events that will change both their lives forever. The director couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in that hallway. For days, the memory of Aisha's calm, confident response replayed in his mind like a broken record. It wasn't just her ability to translate his sentence that irked him. It was the way she carried herself. There was no arrogance, no showboating, just quiet competence. And that unnerved him more than anything. Back in his luxurious office on the top floor, he tried to focus on his work. Scripts needed reviewing, budgets had to be approved, and meetings were scheduled back to back. But every time there was a lull, his thoughts drifted back to her. The way she'd looked at him, not with fear or awe, but with a kind of gentle indifference, stuck with him. He hated it. Or maybe deep down, he admired it. Either way, it was unsettling. What made things worse was that the director didn't like feeling vulnerable. Vulnerability wasn't part of his persona. He prided himself on being untouchable, always in control. Yet here he was, obsessing over a moment where he felt, well, outsmarted by a cleaning lady. To cope, he did what he always did when something bothered him. He talked about it. Not directly, of course. He brought it up casually during lunch with his colleagues, turning the story into a joke. "You won't believe this," he said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "I ran into one of the cleaners the other day and she was listening to some language app. Thought I'd test her skills, just for fun. Turns out she actually knew what she was doing." His friends laughed politely, though they could tell he wasn't entirely amused. One of them chimed in, "Well, good for her. Maybe we should hire her as our translator next time we shoot abroad." The director forced a chuckle but quickly changed the subject. He didn't want anyone digging deeper into why this random encounter still bugged him. To distract himself, he started referring to Aisha, not by name, of course, as the wannabe linguist whenever the topic came up. It was a harmless nickname, he told himself. Just a bit of teasing. Nothing serious. But words have a funny way of spreading, especially in an environment like an office building. Within days, the story reached the ears of other employees. Some found it amusing, a quirky anecdote about their famously arrogant boss getting shown up by someone unexpected. Others weren't so amused. They began looking at Aisha differently. Some pitied her, assuming the director's comments were meant to belittle her. Others whispered behind her back, repeating his nickname for her without realizing how hurtful it might sound. For Aisha, life went on as usual. She showed up to work every morning, did her job with care, and kept practicing. Her French during breaks, she didn't pay much attention to the sideways glances or hushed conversations around her. Years of working in spaces where people overlooked her had taught her resilience. If anything, the whole incident only strengthened her resolve. Her mother used to say, "Education is your ticket to freedom." Those words echoed in her mind whenever doubt crept in. Still, the tension in the air grew thicker. People who once greeted her warmly now seemed hesitant. Some avoided eye contact altogether. Aisha noticed but chose not to let it get to her. She reminded herself why she was learning languages in the first place, to honor her mother's legacy, and create opportunities for herself beyond the mop and bucket. This job paid the bills, but it wasn't her future. It couldn't define her. Meanwhile, the director continued to wrestle with his own feelings. On one hand, he wanted to forget the entire thing ever happened. On the other, he couldn't shake the nagging sense that he'd underestimated Aisha. Worse, he worried that others might see him as petty or insecure for making such a big deal out of it. So, he doubled down on his behavior, using humor as a shield. During another team meeting, he casually mentioned, "I guess we've got a secret genius among us. Who knew mopping floors came with a side of French lessons?" This time, the laughter was quieter, almost uncomfortable. A few people exchanged glances, sensing the underlying tension. One brave colleague leaned over and whispered, "Maybe lay off the jokes, huh? She seems nice." The director waved them off with a dismissive laugh. "Relax, it's all in good fun." But it wasn't fun for everyone. Word spread further, reaching even the building's security guards and cafeteria staff. Soon, Aisha became the talk of the workplace. Not because of her hard work or dedication, but because of the director's repeated jabs. While some defended her, saying she handled herself admirably, others joined in the mockery, mimicking her accent or pretending to stumble through fake translations. Through it all, Aisha stayed focused. She refused to rise to the bait or engage in drama. Instead, she poured her energy into her studies, determined to prove, to herself if no one else, that she was capable of achieving greatness. Every night after work, she sat at her kitchen table with textbooks and notebooks spread out before her. She practiced pronunciation, wrote essays, and even recorded herself speaking to track her progress. Her dream wasn't just about mastering languages. It was about breaking barriers and showing the world that intelligence isn't limited to certain roles or titles. Unbeknownst to Aisha, her quiet determination was about to put her in the spotlight again. This time, however, it wouldn't be in a dimly lit hallway. It would happen in front of an audience far bigger and far less forgiving than the director could have ever imagined. It was a chilly evening, and the office building had transformed into a glittering venue for a charity gala. The same halls where people rushed with papers and laptops during the day were now adorned with sparkling lights, elegant centerpieces, and the hum of polite conversation. Wealthy donors, celebrities, and industry bigwigs filled the space, dressed in their finest suits and gowns. Among them was the director, standing tall and confident as he greeted guests and posed for photos. This was his world, the glitz, the glamour, the admiration. But behind the smiles and handshakes, he couldn't shake off the unease that had been growing inside him. Earlier that week, he'd caught wind of how his comments about Aisha had spread through the office like wildfire. Some people thought it was hilarious, while others found it cruel. He brushed it off, convincing himself it didn't matter what a bunch of employees thought. Still, there was a nagging voice in the back of his mind telling him he might have crossed a line. As the event unfolded, the director took to the stage to deliver a speech. It was something he'd done countless times before, talking about giving back to the community, supporting underprivileged groups, and using his success to make the world a better place. His words dripped with sincerity, even though they came from a script written by someone else. "We must remember," he said, raising his glass, "that everyone deserves respect, no matter their station in life." The crowd clapped politely, but one person in particular listened closely. Aisha, who was working overtime to clean up after the event, stood near the back of the room organizing supplies and tidying up tables. She wasn't paying much attention to the speech at first, but when she heard those words, "no matter their station in life," she let out a quiet, ironic laugh. Respect? From him? That was rich. After the applause died down, someone from the audience called out playfully, "Hey, if you're so committed to respecting everyone, why don't you impress us with some French?" The room erupted in laughter, clearly expecting the director to deliver some charming phrase or witty remark. Caught up in the moment, the director grinned and obliged. He rattled off a sentence in French, trying to sound sophisticated, but nerves got the better of him and he mispronounced a key word, mangling the entire thing. The audience chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to applaud or cringe. Before anyone could react further, a voice rang out from the side of the room. "Actually, that's not quite right." All eyes turned to see Aisha step forward, holding a microphone she'd been asked to set up earlier for the next speaker. She looked calm, composed, and completely unbothered by the sudden attention. Without missing a beat, she corrected the director's mistake, translating the intended sentence flawlessly into English. Then, with a hint of humor, she added, "Maybe stick to directing movies instead of languages, huh?" The room fell silent for a split second before erupting into cheers and applause. People laughed, clapped, and whistled, clearly entertained by the unexpected twist. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment as Aisha handed the microphone back to the MC and returned to her duties as if nothing unusual had happened. For the director, however, the moment felt like an eternity. He stood frozen on stage, his face burning with embarrassment. He hadn't expected this, not here, not now. As the crowd continued to celebrate Aisha's quick wit and linguistic skill, he forced a smile and muttered something about teamwork before stepping off stage. Inside, though, he was seething. How dare she embarrass him like that? In front of all these important people? Unbeknownst to him, someone in the audience had recorded the exchange on their phone. Within minutes, the clip was uploaded to social media, accompanied by captions like "When the cleaning lady schools the director," and "Proof that intelligence has no job title." The video quickly gained traction, racking up thousands of views, likes, and shares. Comment sections lit up with debates about privilege, humility, and the treatment of working-class individuals. By the time the director got home that night, the internet was ablaze. Memes featuring his flubbed French sentence flooded timelines, and hashtags like "Chart respect the cleaner" trended across platforms. Some viewers praised Aisha for handling the situation with grace and humor, while others criticized the director for his arrogance and hypocrisy. Journalists began reaching out for interviews, eager to hear both sides of the story. Aisha, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware of the viral storm brewing around her. Exhausted from a long night of work, she headed home, kicked off her shoes, and made herself a cup of tea. She didn't check her phone until the next morning, and when she finally did, her jaw dropped. Notifications poured in, messages from friends, family, and even strangers congratulating her for calling out the director in such a classy way. At first, she was overwhelmed. Who would have thought a simple correction could turn into such a massive moment? But as she scrolled through the comments and watched the video herself, a sense of pride washed over her. For years, she'd worked tirelessly in the background, invisible to most. Now, suddenly, people were seeing her, not just as a cleaner, but as someone with intelligence, dignity, and worth. Back at the office, the fallout hit the director hard. What started as harmless teasing had spiraled into full-blown public shaming. Social media users dug into his past behavior, uncovering stories of condescension and disrespect toward staff members. Critics accused him of hypocrisy, pointing out the stark contrast between his polished public image and private disdain for those beneath him socially. Sponsors began pulling out of deals, threatening the future of his career. For the first time in his life, the director found himself questioning everything. Was he really the man he claimed to be? Had he become so blinded by his own success that he forgot how to treat people with basic human decency? And most importantly, could he ever redeem himself after this? Little did he know, redemption wouldn't come easily, but it would start with swallowing his pride and facing the very person he'd underestimated. The days following the viral video were a blur for the director. His phone buzzed nonstop with calls, texts, and emails, but none of them brought good news. Sponsors were pulling out of projects, collaborators were reconsidering deals, and industry insiders whispered behind his back about how he'd become toxic. Even his closest friends seemed hesitant to defend him publicly. It was as if the ground beneath him had crumbled, leaving him standing on shaky terrain. At first, he tried to downplay the situation. "It's just the internet," he muttered to himself, scrolling through endless comments that ranged from mocking memes to outright condemnation. But the more he read, the harder it became to ignore the growing wave of criticism. People weren't just laughing at his expense, they were angry. Angry at the way he treated Aisha, angry at the double standards he represented, and angry at the broader system that allowed people like him to thrive while others remained invisible. One morning, after yet another sleepless night, the director sat alone in his office staring at the city skyline. The view that once filled him with pride now felt hollow. For years, he'd built his identity around success, money, fame, power, but suddenly none of it mattered. What good was all of that, if people thought he was a fraud? If they saw him not as a visionary filmmaker, but as a man who mocked a hardworking woman simply because she didn't fit into his narrow definition of worth? He knew he had two choices: fight back or own up. Fighting back would mean denying responsibility, blaming others, or spinning the narrative to paint himself as the victim. But deep down, he knew that wouldn't work. The evidence was everywhere, in the video, in the stories surfacing online, in the faces of the employees who avoided eye contact when he walked by. Owning up, on the other hand, meant swallowing his pride and admitting he was wrong. And that terrified him. After much deliberation, the director decided to reach out to Aisha. He called her supervisor, asking if she'd be willing to meet him for coffee. When the message was relayed to Aisha, she hesitated. Part of her wanted nothing to do with him. She'd already moved past the incident and didn't feel the need to revisit it. But another part of her, the same part that always sought understanding, wondered what he might have to say. After some thought, she agreed to hear him out. They met at a quiet cafe near the office building. The director arrived first, looking unusually disheveled without his tailored suit and polished shoes. When Aisha walked in, she spotted him immediately. She took a seat across from him, her expression calm but guarded. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, the director broke the silence. "Look," he began, fidgeting with his cup, "I owe you an apology. What I said and how I acted, it was wrong. I let my ego get the better of me, and I hurt you. That wasn't fair." Aisha studied him carefully, searching for any hint of insincerity. When she didn't find one, she nodded slowly. "Apology accepted," she said simply. The director looked relieved, but also unsure of what to say next. He cleared his throat. "I know I can't undo what happened, but I want to make things right. Would you consider doing an interview with me? We could talk about, well, everything. Clear the air, show people we're both human." Aisha raised an eyebrow. "You want me to help you fix your image?" He winced at her bluntness, but couldn't deny it. "Yes, but not just for me, for both of us. You deserve recognition for who you are, not just for this one moment, and maybe together we can change the conversation." She leaned back in her chair, considering his offer. While she appreciated his effort, she wasn't interested in being used as a prop for his redemption arc. "If we do this," she said, firmly, "it has to be real. No scripts, no spin, just honesty." The director nodded earnestly. "Deal." Over the next hour they talked, not just about the viral moment, but about their lives, their struggles, and their dreams. The director shared how pressure and expectations had shaped him into someone he barely recognized anymore. Aisha spoke about her love for languages, her mother's influence, and her hope for a brighter future. By the end of their conversation, something shifted between them. They weren't allies exactly, but they weren't enemies either. They were two people trying to navigate a complicated world. As they parted ways, Aisha gave him one final piece of advice. "An apology is a start, but actions matter more. If you really want to make things right, use your platform to lift others up. Create opportunities for people who don't usually get a seat at the table." The director listened intently, realizing she was right. Redemption wouldn't come from grand gestures or flashy interviews. It would come from consistent, meaningful action. Determined to prove he'd changed, he returned to work with a new perspective. First, he issued a public statement acknowledging his mistakes and pledging to support underrepresented voices in the entertainment industry. Then he announced plans to launch a foundation aimed at providing scholarships and mentorship programs for aspiring filmmakers from diverse backgrounds. To ensure transparency, he invited Aisha to serve as an advisor, a role she accepted cautiously, but with optimism. Slowly but surely the tide began to turn. Critics remained skeptical, but many applauded his efforts, recognizing that true growth takes time. As for Aisha, she continued pursuing her passion for languages, using the unexpected spotlight to inspire others. Together, they proved that even the most unlikely encounters could lead to profound change, if only people were willing to listen and learn. The director's decision to launch a foundation aimed at supporting underrepresented voices in the entertainment industry wasn't just a PR move. It was his attempt to rewrite the script of his life. For years, he'd operated in a world where success meant stepping on others to climb higher. Now, for the first time, he found himself trying to build something that would actually help people instead of exploiting them. It wasn't easy, though. Every step felt like walking on thin ice, unsure if his intentions would be seen as genuine or just another hollow gesture. He started by assembling a team to help design the foundation's programs. He reached out to experts in diversity and inclusion, Filmmakers from marginalized communities and even former employees who had once worked under him but left because they didn't feel valued. One of those former employees, a young woman who had quit after being passed over for promotions despite her talent, was particularly blunt during their meeting. "You're asking me to trust you now?" she said, crossing her arms. "After everything, how do I know this isn't just damage control?" The director didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded. "You don't," he admitted. "And honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you walked away right now. But I'm asking anyway because I want to do better. Not just for me, for everyone who deserves a fair shot." Her skepticism softened slightly, but she made it clear. Actions would speak louder than words. Reluctantly, she agreed to join the advisory board, along with several others who shared her concerns. Among them was Aisha, whose presence brought both credibility and accountability to the project. She didn't sugarcoat anything either. During brainstorming sessions, she pushed back against vague ideas and demanded concrete plans. "We can't just throw money at this problem," she said one afternoon, leaning forward in her chair. "If we're serious about creating opportunities, we need to think long-term. Scholarships are great, but what about mentorship, networking, real resources that can help people succeed beyond just getting their foot in the door?" Her input forced the director to rethink his approach. Slowly, the foundation began taking shape, not as a vanity project but as a legitimate effort to address systemic issues within the industry. They created scholarships for students pursuing careers in film and media, partnered with schools in underserved communities to provide equipment and training, and hosted workshops led by successful creators from diverse backgrounds. But outside the foundation's walls, public opinion remained divided. Some praised the director's efforts, pointing to the tangible changes he was making. Others dismissed it all as too little, too late. Social media debates raged on, with hashtags like "Real change vs empty promises" trending alongside clips of Aisha correcting him at the gala. The director knew he couldn't please everyone, but he kept pushing forward, determined to prove that his transformation wasn't superficial. Meanwhile, Aisha found herself navigating uncharted territory. Overnight, she had gone from being virtually invisible to becoming a symbol of resilience and empowerment. Interview requests poured in from news outlets, talk shows, and podcasts. At first, she declined most of them, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. But then she realized something. This was her chance to amplify her message. In interviews, she spoke candidly about her journey, the challenges of growing up poor, the sacrifices her mother made to give her a better life, and the joy she found in learning languages. She talked about how education had opened doors for her and why she believed everyone deserved access to the same opportunities. Her authenticity resonated with audiences, earning her fans around the world. One evening, after taping an appearance on a popular late-night show, Aisha received a standing ovation from the studio audience. As she walked off stage, the host caught up with her and said, You should write a book. People need to hear your story." The idea hadn't occurred to her before, but the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. Writing a book could be another way to inspire others, to remind them that no matter where they came from or what they did for a living, they had value. So, she started jotting down notes between shifts at work, piecing together memories and reflections that would eventually become a memoir. Back at the office building, things were changing too. The director's behavior toward staff members shifted noticeably. He stopped barking orders and started having actual conversations. He learned the names of people he'd never bothered to acknowledge before: janitors, security guards, receptionists, and took the time to ask about their lives. It wasn't perfect, and some employees remained wary, but there was a noticeable improvement in the atmosphere. One day, while riding the elevator with a group of cleaners, he struck up a casual conversation. "How's it going?" he asked, genuinely curious. One of the women glanced at him skeptically. "Better than last month, I guess." Her tone was light, but the underlying tension was clear. The director nodded, letting out a small laugh. "Fair enough. I'll keep working on it." To his surprise, she smiled faintly. "We'll hold you to that." As weeks turned into months, the foundation gained momentum. Its programs began producing results. Students graduating with degrees in filmmaking, aspiring directors landing, internships, and emerging artists showcasing their work at festivals. The director attended these events whenever possible, often inviting Aisha to join him. Together, they celebrated the achievements of individuals whose stories might otherwise have gone untold. Still, the road ahead wasn't without its challenges. There were setbacks, missteps, and moments of doubt. Critics continued to scrutinize every move the director made, questioning whether his efforts were truly altruistic or merely self-serving. Even Aisha sometimes wondered if he fully understood the depth of the inequalities he was trying to address. But through it all, they persevered, driven by a shared belief that change, even incremental, was worth fighting for. By the end of the year, the foundation had become a beacon of hope for many. For the director, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by arrogance or entitlement, but by humility and purpose. And for Aisha, it was proof that dreams could come true, even in the most unexpected ways. Their paths may have crossed by chance, but the impact they created together was anything but accidental. Months had passed since the viral video and the whirlwind of events that followed. The office building where it all began still buzzed with activity, but things felt different now. People greeted each other more warmly, conversations flowed easier, and there was a sense of hope in the air, something that hadn't been there before. Change doesn't happen overnight, but small steps can make a big difference. For Aisha, life was finally starting to align with her dreams. Her memoir had hit shelves just a few weeks ago, and it quickly became a bestseller. Readers connected deeply with her story, how she balanced late-night shifts as a cleaner with her passion for learning languages, how she honored her mother's memory by pursuing education despite countless obstacles, and how one moment of standing up for herself had opened doors she never imagined possible. Bookstores invited her to do signings, schools asked her to speak at assemblies, and strangers sent letters thanking her for inspiring them. But what mattered most to Aisha wasn't the fame or recognition. It was knowing that her journey might encourage someone else to keep going when times got tough. She often said during interviews, "I'm not special because I know French or wrote a book. I'm just someone who refused to give up on myself. And if I can do it, so can you." The director, on the other hand, found himself navigating uncharted waters. For years, he'd measured success by box office numbers and awards. Now, his definition of success had shifted entirely. It wasn't about accolades anymore, it was about impact. He spent less time chasing blockbuster hits and more time mentoring young filmmakers through the foundation. Some of them came from backgrounds similar to Aisha's, while others brought fresh perspectives he'd never considered before. Watching their growth gave him a sense of fulfillment he'd never experienced behind a camera. One evening, the foundation hosted its annual gala, an event celebrating the achievements of its scholarship recipients and program participants. The venue was packed with people from all walks of life. Students showcasing short films they'd made, writers reading excerpts from scripts they'd developed, and artists displaying posters inspired by their cultural heritage. Laughter filled the room, mingling with music and applause. The director stood at the back of the hall, watching quietly. He didn't need to be front and center anymore. This night wasn't about him. As he scanned the crowd, his eyes landed on Aisha, who was chatting animatedly with a group of young filmmakers. She looked radiant, her smile lighting up the room. He couldn't help but feel a pang of gratitude for her, for the lessons she'd unknowingly taught him, and for the opportunity to be part of something bigger than himself. When it was time for speeches, Aisha took the stage. She spoke briefly, thanking everyone involved in making the foundation a reality. Then, turning to the audience, she said, "This is proof that when we choose kindness over arrogance, collaboration over competition, and action over excuses, amazing things can happen. None of us are defined by our mistakes or our job titles. We're defined by how we grow from those moments." Her words earned a standing ovation, and the director clapped along with everyone else. When she stepped down, he approached her hesitantly. unsure if she'd want to talk after such a busy night. "You were incredible," he said softly, offering a genuine smile. "Thank you," she replied, returning the gesture. "So were you. This place feels like magic." He chuckled nervously. "Magic, huh? I think a lot of credit goes to you." Aisha shook her head. "No, it's not just me. It's everyone here. The students, the mentors, the donors, even you. You've come a long way." Her comment caught him off guard, but in a good way. "Do you really think so?" She nodded. "Yeah, I do. Not because you're perfect, you're not. But because you tried. And sometimes trying is enough." Those simple words meant more to him than any award ever could. They reminded him that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing to move forward differently. As the night wound down, the two shared a quiet moment together near the exit. They talked about the future. Not just theirs, but the future of the foundation and the countless lives it would touch. Aisha mentioned she was planning to enroll in a translation certification program, hoping to transition into a career that combined her love for languages with her desire to connect cultures. The director listened intently, promising to support her however he could. Before leaving, he handed her a small envelope. Inside was an invitation to a private screening of a documentary he'd produced, a tribute to underrepresented voices in cinema. "I'd love for you to see it," he said, sincerely. "It wouldn't exist without you." Aisha accepted the invitation with a nod. "I'll be there." And she did attend, sitting quietly in the back row as the credits rolled. Afterward, she approached the director once again, this time with tears in her eyes. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "You've done good work." He smiled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. "So have you." Their paths may not cross daily anymore, but the bond they formed during those turbulent months remained strong. Both had grown in ways neither could have predicted. Aisha proved that talent and determination know no boundaries, while the director learned that true leadership means lifting others up instead of tearing them down. In the end, their story wasn't just about apologies or second chances. It was about the power of human connection, the kind that challenges us, changes us, and ultimately makes us better versions of ourselves. Whether sweeping floors or directing movies, every person has value. And sometimes it takes stepping outside our comfort zones to truly see it.